All right, well, welcome. So we are here for the magic of coaching. This is the second season, and I've got my good friend David that's going to be joining us on this experience. So what we're going to be doing here is over 16 weeks, we're going to be embarking on this coaching journey together. You're going to get a chance to get to know David, get to know what David is creating in his life, and really get the experience of what coaching looks like over a period of time. Because oftentimes what I see is there's a lot of talk about coaching out in the world, a lot of talk about the great things that coaching can do, but nobody's actually showing the craft. Nobody's actually showing what the experience of coaching is like in a public setting. And I think that this is one of the best ways for people to get an experience of it. So David has boldly signed up to do this experience with me. We've actually worked together in the group coaching program I've created called the Masculine Leader. David was one of the first members that joined in 2024. We've stayed in touch over the year, and we've together decided like, hey, this is a great opportunity, to get some support in a private coaching space. And we've got some things that we're going to be working on, over these next 4 to 6 months. So, David, anything that you want to share about yourself, and then also what it is that you really are looking to create in the next 4 to 6 months for yourself.
Yeah, so I've owned my own business doing residential construction, more on the finish end, custom cabinetry and finish work. And I've had three relationships that have the first two I have kids with. My most recent marriage is ending in divorce now. Um, and just really stopped. Last year, just realized I needed to work on myself, that there's a lot of stuff that I needed to do. And one of the things that really drew me to this coaching was just getting to really down to myself and not focusing on my marriage problems or other issues, but really focusing on the work that I need to do for myself. So, um, I've got some stuff going on with some kids, custody type issues and stuff like that. And then business has just been slow with the economy and some of that. And one of the probably biggest things that I took away from the masculine leader coaching was um, to being at cause and not making excuses for the economy or what other things that, I could make excuses for that are somewhat valid excuses, but really owning my place in those things and what I can do to overcome those, looking at pivoting to different angles of the career I'm doing. And then going through coaching, something I've always kind of had a passion for is just helping other people work through things. And I've realized with all the things I've gone through, I have an opportunity to really be understanding and, compassionate and empathetic to people and what they're going through, and really have a lot of wisdom that I can offer through my own experiences. So, I guess going into this, it's really, trying to show up more powerfully as a father in my romantic relationships, in my business, and just really stepping into that. My business has kind of suffered from the personal stuff and just really want to get back and push that forward. And then stepping into some coaching on the side or potentially full time. Um, just really getting into that and pushing myself up to that edge to show up powerfully in whatever area I am um, in.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. And what I'm really present to there for you is, again, just like that deepening layer of being the creator of your life. Just there are circumstances that are going to show up in life, sometimes very hard circumstances, things that are really tough to work with, and yet still being able to move forward and be powerful as a man and as a leader out in the world to really create what you want in life. I think relating back to and just for somebody who is listening, we've already had a few conversations in discovering essence, discovering the qualities and characteristics of who David is, and if he was living in his essence 90% of the time or more, what would be created. And I think one of the big distinguishing factors that we talked about in our last conversation was that mentality of like playing to win in life. Um, what I can speak from experience is like I know 100% you have a capacity to create and you're dedicated to that like pathway of creation. And this next level, this next place of breaking through is the mentality of like I'm winning. This is not about survival anymore. This is about winning and just like empowering that aspects of life.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I had a lot of vision. I mean, when I was in high school, there was three or four different business that I wanted to start, three or four different ideas I had. I had this vision of what my family and my home would look like. And I think my first marriage with four kids, when that fell apart, really just, you know, I kept pushing forward with business. Business was still going well. The economy was doing pretty well at the time. But then, with my family falling apart, just really like losing focus on I didn't continue to create vision. My vision that I had that I created was falling apart. And when then I think I really got lost in what to do now because I had this one plan that I had figured out that when that fell apart, now what? How do I pick up the pieces there and use those experiences to push me and to use for, you know, to deepen my wisdom in life and my experiences in life to be more powerful through those experiences and to
Hmm.
really use those negative things to push me forward and to propel me forward and to um, give me skills that I wouldn't have without those experiences.
Sure. For sure. Um, and so a couple of things that I'll just put into the conversation that we spoke about. As you know, I've definitely taken some notes here. Um, you spoke about, I'd say really three big areas of focus in our coaching, and not that these can't change, but this is what you spoke about was really just that energy of being all in over being half-assed. So being all in all areas, right? Which includes sales, which includes marketing, uh, shifting from people pleasing to, just being that leader. That was category one. Category two was completion of the past and, just being able to continue to develop that muscle of completion to be able to work with the emotion, the shame, the guilt that's showing up in the past, being able to declare it complete, to be able to give yourself more ease and just like fluidity as you move forward into the future. And then what you've spoken to as well was really creating that legacy, creating that second half of life, legacy for your boys, for your girls, and also legacy through business. So, in a nutshell, those were the three kind of big bucket categories that, I well, we determined together. Anything you want to speak to with those, or does that feel pretty good to you?
Yeah, no, I think that feels really good. I think that really sums up what my goals are from this.
Yeah, for sure. Excellent. Okay. And like I said, right, like we may find like it changes or it adjusts a little bit, but that's really where we're moving towards is deepening in each of those three areas. So, okay, we're going to jump into, our first recorded coaching session for today. And is there any grounding work or meditation work that you want to do for today, or do you feel we can just dive into the session?
I think we can just dive right into it.
Okay, excellent. So, oh, and one thing I know I mentioned it to you before, but I'll mention it again. There might be a chance that I get a call from my son's school, in our call. So if I do, I'll just let you know and just I might have to put us on pause for a few minutes. But rather than, frantically throwing it in there or some point in the conversation, just letting you know.
Yep, no problem.
Cool. Um, okay, so what is it that you'd like to explore or experience in our conversation today?
Yeah, I mean, so we talked about the potential of some of the things with my girls. I think for the most part, though, I think I've kind of come to a completion on what next steps I have to take. I mean, obviously, you know, I've noticed one of the things about myself, I try to get this picture perfect plan laid out. And as life unfolds, it never goes as planned. So I think I've got a direction to go right now, and then down the road, I'm sure there'll be some pivots to what actually ends up happening. But um, so you'd mentioned being open, having some suggestions too. So I'd like to hear what your thoughts are and what directions you could see areas of coaching.
Yeah, I mean, I think that and there is probably some correlation to the conversation about your daughters is continuing to build this capacity of moving from survival state to one of essence. Because one of the things that I think really showed up, and if it was not our first conversation, or maybe, in the first two conversations, was what you've spoken to is that, like, yeah, I've really been in sort of a survival state for quite a few years that um again, you've created in that, you've been resilient in that, but it also does feel like there has been some loss of that visionary, of that, like, hey, what if I just played to win in life? What if I just was like, this is what I want to create and I'm going to go get it? You know, that's one of the things that was present for me in those first few sessions.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, there was something that popped up. A really cool opportunity, I think, for in the construction field is this blueprint thing, and they're looking for people to open franchises where basically open a storefront where they project your blueprints onto the floor. And I saw this first come up probably a year ago, and I was like, that's really cool because every customer I deal with has these. Um, they just can't, on a piece of paper, they can't envision how big a 10 by 10 room is and really feel what that is. And so having this opportunity to be able to have a life-size floor plan that you can walk through, it's still 2D, but you're feeling it. And I thought it was cool, and it popped up on Facebook yesterday. They're looking for franchise opportunities. In my area, there's nothing for probably 4 or 5, 6 hours away. And it was one of those things where I was like, that's really cool. I'd love to do that. And then that survival mechanism kind of kicked in where it's like, you're not in a place to do that. You can't do that. Like, that's, one of the areas that I've wanted to expand with my construction part of my business is getting more into architectural work. So this would follow right into that. And my first time I got all excited and then just like kind of went to bed excited on it and woke up this morning was like, you're just kind of, that's a pipe dream. It's never going to happen. And so, defaulting back to that, that survival mechanism. And I guess one of the other things too, as we were riding around on the quads over the weekend was seeing all these new houses that have been built around us. Like one's a quarter mile down the road or half mile down the road. And I'm like, huge house that was built here in a rural area. And I'm like, how come my name wasn't brought up in that? I mean, it's a neighbor. Why was I not brought up? And not getting to that place of like discouragement, but like you speak to of like getting out of that survival mechanism because it probably came up while life was seemed like a shit show, and I wasn't pushing my marketing like you've mentioned, and really getting myself out there. Like I've been in this community for 15 years. Why is my phone in this community? I mean, there was in the just the rural roads that we rode yesterday, there was probably 5 or 6 houses that were built in the last couple of years. Not one did I get a call on. And why is that? Why am I not getting that networking that, you know, out in the community? So I think that goes right into what you're talking about and is definitely an area to explore.
Yeah, for sure. And so is the conversation today focused on that that storefront, and creating the pathways to that, or is it more of the, we'll call it the general conversation about shifting that mentality from survival to, possibility, we'll call it.
Right. Yeah. I think it's more shifting that mindset of that I get these ideas and I'm like, oh, that'd be really cool. I could do this. And then that survival mechanism, that voice in my head's like, yeah, but your life's too much of a shit show right now. Even as we were talking about vacation plans or all those things that kind of come up, and it's like, you've got too much on your plate right now, which there is a lot on my plate. But like we talked about, not really fulfilling what I want to do, letting all those outside problems that come into life consume life. And it's a lot. I mean, that's where I struggle, like the balance of finding grace to myself of it is a shit show. Don't beat yourself up that you don't have a multi-million-dollar company because the last 15 years have been a struggle.
Hmm.
Um, but also not letting that be the place where I'm 65 years old and go, I have no business to retire from because I never took those risks. I never did those things that I wanted to do.
Absolutely. Well, and what is like sort of stirring up within you that this conversation of like shifting into more of that possibility mindset, like why is that important for you now?
Well, I think because I look back at the last, 10, 12, 13 years of life and go, my business, I mean, I started my business when I was 20 years old. And it took, it was a slow getting going. There was a time probably, at the 5 year mark that business was really booming. I was expanding a lot. Things were going really well. Then my divorce hit, things kind of slowed down, but then I got some more really good jobs and some really cool opportunities. Um, And then again, part of it's the economy, but I think, you know, I think the economy's made it harder, but there were things even part of the shift that happened 5 years ago is I really put my name out there. I went out to builders in the area and was like, had a time there where before my divorce where things were really solid. And it was like, I just had this drive, like, yes, I offer the best cabinets and you're crazy not to use my product.
Hmm.
In your new home. So your new homes I would add value to your new homes, and just life beat me down kind of changed that mindset of like, yeah, whatever,
Mm.
just get enough money to pay the bills and not having that passion about the work that I'm doing and um, just settling really for whatever, really to make. I think it started when I after my divorce I went into doing more subcontracting instead of stuff on my own because it was too much. I had young kids that I was trying to get to school and trying to do billing and bidding and get work done on my own was too much. And so I needed that for a time. And then I got comfortable in that place to where now my business name has gotten kind of umbrellaed underneath whoever I'm
Yes.
subcontracting for to the point where my company doesn't really exist to the world anymore. It's always umbrellaed to somebody
Hmm.
else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so one of the things that I hear and that you're speaking to is that, the a part of the why is that your capacity to be driven, to be out there, to be like powerful when, I'll say that there's like a vision, there's a purpose behind it. And, my sense of it there, kind of like you're speaking to, is that over these years of being beaten down and having to go through the stuff that you've gone through, it's like that zest, that passion, that purpose, it's kind of it's withered a bit. It's not like it's completely disappeared, but it's dissipated. And then, what I know about you, but yet the fire is still burning. The fire is still definitely burning within in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, um, it definitely is. I mean, there's that passion's there, but then it seems like every venture I try to go out on, every, opportunity, even before we got on the call, I had some time today that I was trying to work on something. And it's a project I've done. It's on a dirt bike tearing a motor apart, and I've done it 10 times. But today, I was like, all right, I got a little time. I'm not going to waste that time and tried to get into it. It just kicked my ass. And just being like,
Hmm.
see, when I try to do something, when I have that fire, it always ends up just not working out. And just that burnout, I think of like every time I try to get ahead in life, it just always seems like I'm met with 50 different walls and roadblocks in life. And, you know, not that, and then I look back and I'm like, well, when I started at 20 and I just bought a house and I had young kids, it wasn't easy then either. I
Sure.
mean, looking back now, there's times I'm like, how did I even have food on the table? Like, I didn't have consistent work. I didn't have, I kept my overhead low and things, but like I had to hustle to get it done.
Hmm.
And, as I get older, you want a little more financial security. So I think there's some of that to where it's just, struggling with not, I don't want to hustle anymore. I want to have that career, but,
Sure.
needing to put in that work to get there and not letting the defeat overcome that fire that's there.
Yeah, and so and again, if we really speak to the why, like the what for, I hear the side of like, well, this is what's happened in the past. And the thing that I'm still curious about is like, yes, but what is the what for your future? By you cultivating that fire, and let's just say creating things that actually make you win in life, what does that experience create for you?
Well, I mean, it puts me back on track to those goals I had in high school.
Mm,
I mean, that's where I've been struggling a lot recently is like, okay, that I had all these dreams and these goals that, yeah, most of them didn't go the way I planned. But that doesn't mean that at the end of the day, I just go, well, screw it. It didn't work out. And so, woe is me. Life's just going to suck. I think
sure.
I see it a lot in tradesmen, these guys in their 40s, 50s that are just alcoholics that have no drive. No, I mean, DUI, no license, no vehicle, struggling along, living with some girlfriend or something. And when I was younger, I was like, dude, what's wrong with these guys? Why do they do this? And I'm to that place where I'm like, okay, they went through some really bad divorces, they lost everything. And instead of getting back on the horse and going for it, it was just like, what's the point? And I think, I don't want to get to that point where it's like, all right, it's over now, it's all failure. Like, yeah, there's
Yes.
been disappointments, but I'm not gonna let that define my life.
Yeah. Well, and what I really hear for you, and again, like the opportunity is to like, you know, like I want to paint the full picture, right? Because like what I hear is there is that like when you reflect on the past, there's that youthful energy. You can look back to those high school years and connect to, wow, I was motivated then. Wow, I saw the world in this amazing way. And what I wrote down in my notes here was like there was this innate possibility. You just saw possibility out in the world. And that's what really this is about, is just being that even with all that's occurred. As you go into the future, that's just who you are.
But yeah, I think you're right. I mean, there was a naive, the world's full of opportunity, which it is. But what I was naive to was how much pain and hurt and struggle and turmoil there was to get to those possibilities. And I think I'm in an opportunity in a place in life now that it's like, get back to the place where you see that opportunity and come powerfully from a place. Now I'm gonna really like just kill it and just come at it and
Mhm.
just I'm gonna overcome now that I know how much pain and struggle and difficulties there is. Don't forget about the opportunity. And then there's real power. I mean, my youthful side was cute because it had that like, oh, it's cute. Everything's happy and rainbows and easy and life's fun and you just get married and have kids and have a happy marriage. And it's funny. You hear that in young men all the time, and it's like, and I remember being younger and older guys being like, yeah, life sucks, and I'm like, oh, come on, quit being so negative. And now I'm that old guy
Hmm.
that's like, life does really suck, but don't forget about that opportunity and kick that suck in the ass and overcome it
Yes. Yeah,
because
I
that's where the real
totally,
power is.
well, and I totally get it. Like, me too, in my 20s, there's a real reality check there of life, of like,
Yeah.
oof. And, it's the bitterness, the rigidity can be created from that if we allow that over time as life beats us down. You see it as you're speaking to, you see it out in the world. There's a possibility that we could also be it if we allowed it to, right? So it's recognizing that, and as you're speaking to, it's allowing yourself to really like be attuned to, that innate possibility again. And so where we want to connect this to is we're not going back 20 years. I want you to share, just in the last couple of years, maybe in the last month, or, where have you been connected to that innate possibility again? Where was there a moment where you're just like, oh yeah, like this is present for me. This is something that I could pursue.
Well, I think like looking, I mean, had my eye out for different avenues of where, you know, what could be pursued because obviously the angle, the direction that I've been going isn't working given the economy, given those certain things. And I've had a shift too with, you know, going from that wanting to be the person doing all the work to getting older and going, okay, I need to be teaching someone else how to do the work. I need to be delegating this out more. Um, I think that's one area is just trying to find, it doesn't fit my personality. I've always had kind of that hands-on, just let me do it kind of mentality and really getting to a place like, okay, I need to be bringing up the next generation of people to work underneath me and step into that leadership more than just being that person who is doing all the work I mean, and that goes from designing my website to doing the accounting to doing the bidding to doing marketing and just stepping back and going like you can't do all of that. So
Hmm.
where do you succeed and where you're good at and then what areas can you find people to delegate those things. um
Sure.
you know and there's a certain level of where I have a high level of skill in the work that I do that is somewhat teachable, but also somewhat just skills that can't be taught and really plugging those things in. So, this is where I succeed. This is where I shine. Um, and that might be more management. That might be more certain hands-on things, but there's areas where I need to delegate and seeing where I need to delegate.
Hmm.
Um,
Are you okay if I
and
pause you
then,
here for a sec?
yeah.
Okay, so good. Like, so we can see, there's like inklings of possibility in terms of like, hey, where do I lead? Where do I show up powerfully? What are the tasks that I can take on and, do them well versus, as you're speaking to, hey, starting to look at outsourcing or bringing in team members to help support in those areas that, you don't feel as competent in, right? So, okay, good. And then what we want to get present to is, but then what happens? Right? Like we know that, in this moment, the team isn't there.
Mhm.
The movement hasn't been created. So what gets in the way of you taking something like that possibility and actually making it a reality?
I think getting connected to the right people probably is one of the biggest issues, is finding that networking. I think one of my biggest issues is poor networking. Um, and a lot of that comes from just being busy and being, working all the time to, you know, um, and just my location's difficult as well. But, figuring out how to really network and to build relationships to create so that I am the person that people reach out to have the work done.
Hmm.
And I'm not just the last on the list or, even I've seen even with, I had customers that would give me word of mouth, but that was 10 years ago I did that job. And, now they kind of forgotten or it's tapered off or whatever. So how do you keep that in the front of people's mind and
Hmm.
networking and
Mm.
connecting with the right people, I think is probably the biggest struggle I have.
Okay. So and okay, like the thing that we want to be present to here, right, is that if we stay with the bigger conversation of moving from survival to possibility as just a way of being, we're starting to sort of look specifically at an area in terms of leadership and delegation, and you're speaking to some of the things that even get in the way of your leadership and delegation. But if we actually bring it back to that conversation about winning mindset, of just being able to be connected to possibility, even with those circumstances, how could you shift it right now?
I think probably really just telling me, myself that I have to get out there and try that,
Hmm.
putting forth that effort, really reminding myself that, yeah, it might fail, but it also might not. And the only way
Mm.
to find out is to really put myself out there to try. And not doing is more of a failure than trying and it not working out. Um, that to do nothing's the biggest failure versus actually trying and then it not working to what you'd hoped.
Well, and is that what's really happening underneath that is like, yeah, you could speak to the poor networking that you've been doing or, lack of follow-up with referrals, but underneath that, is there is there like a how would I say it? Just like a belief that like, what's the point? I'm going to fail anyways.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's probably the underlying exactly it. I think, with my relationships failing and putting so much effort into those, unfortunately, that mindset of my relationships and some of the struggles I've had with my kids, feeling sometimes like a failure as a dad, has bled over into work more than it's actually work has not failed as much as my personal life. We'll call it failure for lack of a better term, but that mindset of my personal life has bled into my business. You just fail at everything.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and like that's heavy. Well, I'm calling it heavy, but just how does it feel to actually come to that like the unconscious elements of how you're seeing yourself, whether it's in business or relationship or as a father, is that there is that aspect of just you're a failure.
Yeah, I mean, I think acknowledging it for what it is. And like I said, when I consciously I look at it and go, you're not a failure at business, you're not a failure at your relationships. I mean, there's been things I've failed at, but overarching, I put in effort. I tried. I probably failed at who I chose to be in relationship to. There were breakdown moments with my kids, but overall, I think when I'm conscious of it, I don't see it
Mm.
as failure.
Hmm.
Um, I don't see my business as well, and it's interesting. I see my business more as failed than the relationships I've had because my business is supposed to be creating more financial independence than it is. I can look at the positives from my relationships probably easier because I go, well, I have my kids, you know, I've learned things through these relationships. These difficult relationships have made me stronger. But then that subconscious mindset of you're a failure has clearly bled into work where I'm not, but my mindset, my subconscious mind goes, I don't even know why you try at work either. You're failing at home.
Hmm.
And so when I really am like have the right answers and I'm in a conscious state, I go, no, you're not a failure at either one. But that day to day subconscious underlying feeling is you're not where you dreamed you would be 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So you're a failure.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that is, again, what you're speaking to is really powerful, right? Because yes, you have a very conscious ability to be able to distinguish between success and failure when, you're present to it. But the real growth or the opportunity to the edge here is how do we shift this way of being entirely so it's not just when you're conscious but also when you're unconscious as well, that that underlying belief isn't shaping your decisions, your actions, your behaviors, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it being on the right path, I think, of just working on those nice guy tendencies of that or that insecurity of like well, one, like it's the nice guy tendency of just like if I call somebody to ask them, do cold contact type stuff or whatever, am I going to annoy them? What are they going to think of me?
Mm,
And just getting to a place where I don't care what you think of me. I'm putting my I have a good product, I have a good thing to offer. If I annoy you by offering it, whatever, that's your problem, not mine.
hmm
Um, and so shifting that, like not feeling like a burden to people of pushing my product. Like, do I believe in it? Yeah. So why am I not more adamant about it? You know? Um, and I think I should mask that. Well, if your product's so good, it'd speak for itself. And the
hmm
reality is, yes and no. A kitchen doesn't speak for itself. It does for the people that see it, but how many people see that? You know? And so really getting out there and just being like, yeah, it's the best and I do really good work. And, you know, um, so I think there's that. And I think just continuing to grow in confidence in myself that, um, reminding myself that what my essence is and what my core who I am as a person. Like, those values are important. Those things are great. And that's not the mindset of someone who's a failure. That's the mindset of someone who's successful. And, you know, having some grace and understanding to what's happened, why it's gone the way it has, but really accepting that it's not failure.
hmm
That yeah, there's life is hard. So life happened and life sucks sometimes. And that's what we're overcoming. And because life, it wasn't, you know, this dream I had 25 years ago of life when I was in high school of it being easy and fun and no problem. I didn't fail at that because that wasn't reality. Like that was
hmm
a naive dream without factored in all of the problems of life and the difficulties of life and the variables that you don't have control over. Um, and then just going into that, I think too, with a poor mindset of how dangerous the world can really be, and what that really looks like, and not being on guard enough to protect myself from those situations that I faced.
Mm. So what's present for me is what would it take for you to just love and cherish yourself in all situations?
I think one of the things that's something I've been working on over the last year is just looking at situations for what they are and then going, okay, so these things, how did that help me? How did that hard trial struggle that I went through, I made it through one. That was hard. That sometimes breaks people. Um, it's interesting, like the more I've talked to people, people are just like, dude, like you've gone through a lot in your life. And it's like, yeah, I guess I have. And, so part of me is like, yeah, you failed. And then it's when people tell me that, it's like, oh, well, you know, maybe the average person would have quit a long time ago and not kept trying. And so I didn't quit trying. I lost some of that fire in me, but along the way, but you know, again, I didn't fail. I didn't give up. I didn't quit. I kept trying. I kept working on myself as a person to overcome these things.
Well, in my experience of it for you is that, the way that you connect to love for yourself is through experiences, through the trials, the tribulations that you face that have forged you as a man. So I'm present to that part of it. But yet, the piece that is a little bit missing, I'll say, is like, yes, and what about just actually loving yourself for who you are in your essence? I think it's a very fitting space to land with the essence words because like what if there wasn't those experiences and those trials and tribulations? Do you actually connect to the love of just the qualities that you bring to the world, who you are, and that's it?
Right. Yeah. And I think that is, again, that's something that I've worked on is it's had to start with having grace with myself of like, you're not perfect. Nobody is. But if you look at who I am as a person, would I be friends with that person? Hell yeah, I would.
Hmm.
I'd love to have myself as a friend and really valuing that. I mean, that's one of the biggest things like that I think that helped me work through my self-worth and relationships was like, I think it's what killed my self-worth originally was nobody wants me. But then
Hmm.
stepping back and going like, well, that's your loss because I do have a lot to offer. I do have um, the qualities that show up for me, that essence, that's there's value in that. There's value in that personally. There's value in that in the workspace. There's value in that, in the home and friendships. Those are things that are missing in so many different areas. So yeah, I bring a lot to the table, and that's something
Hmm.
to be proud of.
Yeah. And I suspect, and again, you can check me on this, that again, you're smart. You have wisdom, right? So, what we're speaking to is that David has the love, has the cherishing of self in consciousness when things are going well or things are going, in a steady flow, we'll say. But my hunch is that yes, but once we get into that space of when things aren't going well, or you're on that edge, or you're in that space of unconsciousness, that's where this love starts to dissipate.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you're absolutely right. If I sit down and I'm in a good mood, sitting, things are peaceful, things are okay, the bills are paid, whatever. Even if business isn't booming, but I've prepared and saved and been wise with my money, I can go, yeah, I'm a great person. It's when
Mm,
the shit really hits the fan and you've got, allegations of abuse to my kids or, you know, um, whatever, my kids don't want to talk to me or my marriage has fallen apart and I'm struggling to know how I'm going to pay next month's bills. That's when I go, well, you're just an idiot. If you could have figured
yeah.
this out, like, of course you don't have work. You haven't been out marketing. Of course you don't have work. You haven't done the steps you need to. Of course your relationships are failing. You failed in this way, this way, this way. Because and I think what it comes down to is living in past regret versus looking to the future. I mean, there's a place to reflect on that pain, those things that I've done, those shortcomings, and overcome those. But at the same time, like you can't just dwell on that. You can if
Hmm.
you stay there, you stay there. You stay in that place. The only way to overcome is to do better next time and to be faced with the same thing and get through it and go, yeah, this time I didn't. I learned from that mistake and building on that. But I mean, that's I think where I struggle is there's a certain level where I have overcome certain things. There's a certain level where I haven't overcome things, and never will I get to a point where I've overcome everything and I'm perfect. But the more areas I think I see it, especially again where the failures, we'll call it personally, overflowed into business. I see as I start to feel like I've had wins personally in my personal life I start to build steam again in my career going, yes, you can, you have wins personally, and that needs to flow over to business. And, um, and then just for myself too, just going, you overcame these things and you
Can I
didn't
pause
just
you here
let
for a
it.
sec?
Mhm.
Yeah. And it's the same dynamic because what that's really speaking to is like if David's winning in life, you feel good about yourself. And when you're in the shit or you're losing in life, that's where you start to be hard on yourself or you lose that love for yourself. And this is the trap in a sense, is that whether you're doing good or you're doing bad, the experience of you is based off of the external.
Hmm.
And what I'm present to here is what if none of that mattered? How then do you forge that inner self?
Well, I think what bothers me is, and you kind of alluded to it earlier, was when I feel like I didn't show up as my essence, and I
Hmm.
know that I can do more. So those moments of breakdown, I go, that's not who you are. Why'd you do that?
Mm.
You know, that wasn't acting in integrity. That wasn't wise. That wasn't, you know, where'd your vision go there? You weren't authentic in this area. And that's who you are. And I think it more than anything, it really comes down to being disappointed in myself, knowing that I have more to offer and I didn't.
Hmm.
And so, like, yeah, it's those externals, but really being frustrated with myself for not showing up. And again, that's where stepping back into that grace to myself and going, yeah, you had a lot on your plate. I mean, there was a lot of variables, a lot of factors going on that that was a moment of breakdown. So what do you do now? Do you continue to break down or do you go, okay, I screwed up. Now I get back up and I get back into that place. I think correcting my frame and my form and my centeredness quickly, bouncing back from that place is really what's changed me the most is going, yeah, you had a moment of weakness. You fell down, you know, you screwed up. You gonna sit there and cry about it, or you gonna get back up and move forward?
Hmm.
Because I would say as a whole, that center, that who I am, that essence of me, I appreciate. It's when those I have breakdown in those areas that I go, oh, so you're just a screw up. That's you thought that's who you were. That's not who you are anymore because you let yourself down in that area.
Hmm. For sure. And I can hear you, in those moments of grace, for the most part, shifting back to a place of just empowering self.
Hmm.
So really good. And what are you taking from our conversation to this point?
Well, I mean, just to focus on those things that are essence when those areas come up, either past or present, where I feel like I've stepped out of that, just realigning with that essence quickly and knowing who I am at the core and going, okay, yeah, you get a moment of weakness, we all do. Are you going to sit here and dwell on what a fuck up you are? Or are you going to change and you're going to move forward now? You know,
Hmm.
because like you can sit here and wallow in your self pity and you're a failure and blah blah blah. But where's that get you? What are you doing for yourself? Are you getting somewhere? And so I think for me, just accepting that we're none of us are perfect, but that doesn't change who I am at the core. Even though I let myself down on an area of essence, that doesn't mean that's not who I am. It's one of the
Hmm.
things like with my kids, if I'm talking to them about lying, like one lie doesn't, I mean, kind of makes you a liar. But are you going to change and course correct, or are you going to continue going through your life continuing to tell lies? So if if I break down in wisdom and I do something foolish, now am I a fool or did I have a moment of weakness? Well, my choices from here forward decide whether I'm a fool or I'm wise. Am I going to continue to show up in foolishness? Is that now my essence? Or is my essence getting back to wisdom? Like, yeah, I made a
Hmm.
foolish choice, but that doesn't make me a fool unless I continue down that path.
Sure. Yep. So as we come back to that conversation about playing to win and shifting into that state of possibility, what do you see from here? How do we connect this thread of, you know, well, just what you're speaking to now stepping out onto the edge of those areas?
Well, I think probably something um, that I need to do here soon, try and really schedule some time out for, is doing another, working on some of those projects we did in the masculine leader group. Because the one that I did on the family for my home, I think for the most part was very powerful. For the most part, um, we've stuck to in the home, and it's greatly changed our family dynamic and our home dynamic. Um, and so there's that part of it that I think is, if I could put that into more areas and create those tangible goals and creating those steps that I need to take, I think is part of what I need to do. Um,
Hmm.
and just I think that one was easy because I had the most control over it, which I mean at times was hard too, because that's part of what I think led to where I'm at with my marriage is not allowing that project to fail. And so I think seeing that power of what happened there, like I sacrificed, well, I mean, sacrifice probably isn't the right word, but the direction of my marriage was directly affected to the choice through that project because I set standards, I set not expectations, but agreements with the whole family of what the home is going to look like. And when my wife didn't uphold her end, I said, "Look, there's a problem. What are we going to do to change it?" Um, and we didn't come to an agreement there. And it was like, well, my goal isn't going to change. And I think if I
Hmm.
do that in other areas, that's going to have the same effect. So I don't know if it was easy. I mean, because it definitely had its moments of difficulty, but it felt like I had the most control over that, I
Sure.
suppose. Um, but so I think that's why it's scary kind of to step out and do those things where there's so many more variables in it.
Yes.
Um, but again, not looking at setting tangibles that are within my control. So if I do this for business, reaching out to different people for um, leads. That doesn't mean I'm going to get leads. That just means I'm going to put out, feelers for those. And if I call 150 people and they all say no, I didn't fail because I did my work, you know, and that's really no different than the home project. I didn't fail at the home project, even though my wife ended up leaving. I'm still in integrity, holding to what that vision I had with my home.
Hmm.
She's no longer part of it, but I held to it. And so again, I think shifting that, I think there's a big shift that I need to have there is I feel like if I don't control the outcomes, then I must have failed.
Yeah.
And, if so, whatever that means in different areas, like if I bust my ass and a job goes like shit and I lose money on a project and I don't come out going, well, that wasn't the goal of what I wanted to make. Well, I showed up every day, I did everything I could. There were some unforeseen things that didn't work out. That doesn't mean I am a failure as a human being. Life just sucks
Yeah, for
sometimes and
sure.
things don't go.
So really good what I hear you speaking to and like great ability to connect, like playing to win, playing for possibility and tying it to a project. Because you're right, that in itself, creating a project that is a little edgy, or with less controllable variables, it's actually going to just like push you into the possibility.
Mhm.
So what, where would you start? Like, which area of life would you want to create a project around? Just pick one area.
Yeah, and that I mean, I think there's several different layers to it. So I think one of the things I need to do that I really need to make time for is first of all establishing where my business is going with
Hmm.
my friend that I'm working with because um really getting clear on what that looks like for us because if are am I creating this with him? Am I creating this on my own? I mean, we've
Sure.
got it's difficult because we're really close friends. There's some um but it's something I need to really get it clear on because and so maybe that's I don't know. I'll have to look at the project structure if that's even something I could maybe do.
Well, sure.
Is
And
establishing
the thing that I would offer you is to keep it big vision, right? So you the one thing that you could start with is yes, there could be a conversation with your coworker, and establishing what needs to happen next so you have that clarity. The other piece that you could also just start with is start with the project. It's not like the
Mhm.
project can't be edited, right?
Yep.
So you could always start with the business framework. You could include coaching in that, as well if you wanted to, and just start with an overall structure of what your business could look like. And then if variables change, they change, but at least you've got the project in place rather than waiting.
Right. And I think you're right, starting big. So with a big vision, big picture, so that like
Yeah.
drawing the coaching and drawing in whatever the possibility of this opening a franchise with this other company and just all that lay out all those possibilities.
Yeah.
And then start from, branching off. Okay, what steps? I mean, maybe I call this company and whatever, they don't think the area I'm in is good or it's just not feasible or whatever. Okay, fine. So that's checked off the list. That's not going to work. Or maybe it does. Maybe, yeah, they've been wanting to start something like that. What next steps do I need to take there? Um, and then just kind of, branching out in each area of where that goes. So,
Yeah.
um, and even maybe somewhat on with my coworker of like, so that branches out. Like there's certain areas where he does his own thing and certain areas I do my own thing. And then in the middle, there's some areas where we work together on projects and
Yes.
establishing what that looks like. Um, and so all those different, you know, and then on the coaching side of it. So really it's a project of non-personal life, essentially. I mean, anything outside my home, the family and my home life, what am I creating outside of that?
Yeah, I would even say too, you could just bucket it into career, right?
Hmm.
Right now,
Yep.
career has these different subcategories, but it's again, because when we get into the project design tool, right, you're creating the experience that you want for all of those areas, and then that experience trickles down into each subcategory, right?
Yep.
So really good. When will you have the first draft of the business project complete by? Or this career project, we'll say. It's May 5th today.
Yeah. Um, see. So I'm gonna say by the end of May. I know that's a little far out. Um, but I know also too, just here last week, I've just been kind of feeling underwater about stuff, and I don't want to set a date that, um, with stuff going on with my kids, I know I'm getting a lot of pressure. I got to make some decisions here
Hmm.
and some of those things. So I don't want to.
Okay, so let's just pause it here without
Yep.
explanation. So what date? May 31st?
Yeah. Or let's go
Okay,
June
cool.
1st, just for ease of
Okay,
math or
cool.
whatever.
Okay, so June 1st. Good.
Yep.
Um, I've got a couple practices that I want to give you as well. Um, One simply of so we've got project rough draft complete by June 1st. I simply want you to write out just like 5 areas of possibility in your life. So whether that's vacation, career, health and fitness, I want you to actually start just building the muscle of writing it out and just connecting to like, what do I want? What do I want in life? Part two of that practice is being able to write it out without feeling like you have to make a commitment to it. I have a sense that a part of where you get stuck in the possibility is like, oh, if I write it out or if I think about it, I need to fulfill on some aspect of it or I feel like a failure. And I
Yeah.
want you to just start practicing with that muscle of like, I can envision things, I can dream things, and that can just be okay. It doesn't mean I have to pursue them all.
Hmm.
It doesn't mean I have to do anything about it, but it's just even cultivating that muscle of like, hey, I think it'd be really cool to create this, or it'd be really cool to create that. And then bring that back, share it with me, first of all, and then bring it back to our conversation because we can continue to explore this in terms of creation. Does that make sense?
Hmm. Yeah. How'd you word that? Rate them out without what?
Yeah, I said write out 3 to 5 areas. I'm actually going to up it. I'm going to say 5 to 10 areas of possibility that you want to create. Could be in
Okay.
any area of life. That's like part one. And part two would just be practicing writing it out without feeling like you have to make a commitment to it.
Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, that's where I struggle is wanting to hold to that integrity. And if it's written down or it's expressed,
Mm,
then if it doesn't happen, I think I put this pressure on myself that it's like, oh, so you failed at that. And
yes.
that really allowing those possibilities to be just that, it's a possibility. And it's
Yep.
not doesn't mean there has to be a whole full-fledged business model off of this, a whole business plan with every step. It's just, it's an option. It's a possibility of something that can be done.
Yes. And I'm going to give you one more practice to go back and watch the integrity video again in
Okay.
in the masculine leader because no surprise, because one of your essence qualities is integrity, and you really stand behind integrity. When you feel like you're out of integrity, that's where your survival mechanism also comes in. There's a shadow side to it, right? So
Hmm.
I know your capacity with an integrity where, again, like you're able to see the fluidity of it. Like, hey, if I make a commitment, and I don't follow through on that commitment, I can recommit myself to it, right? But there's also an edge there. You can hear the edge in your speaking of like, if I put my word to it and I don't follow through, I'm a failure. That tells me that, again, it's like, it's an opportunity to just shift that relationship to integrity at that next level.
Yep.
Awesome. Um, so you've got, so yeah, just and that last practice of watching the integrity video. Any questions or anything else that you want to speak to as we start to come to completion for today?
No, I don't think so. I think that pretty well thumbs up.
Awesome. Any anything that you're taking away from our session today or you want to speak to?
Well, I think just, again, I think you're right on point there to getting to that place where having vision without as possibilities. I mean, there's people I've known who are great visionaries, and some of them, I don't know, we'll say a third of their ideas were good, and I hear these people talk. I used to be judgmental of like, oh, you got all these ideas, but you never actually do anything. And then as time's gone on, I've kind of been like, man, I wish I had more ideas like some of these people.
Sure.
And the reality is, you have to be free with those as possibilities. Like they're just spitballing these ideas. They may not be good. They might not stick. They might not land, but they're ideas. And then I get frustrated. I'm like, well, man, I don't have anything going on in here. Like I'm just kind of stuck in this boring place. Well, I put myself there because I had put that container so tight of if you have an idea, it better work out. So you're not just one of these people
Hmm.
out here just throwing stupid ideas out that you never complete.
Yeah.
Well, now I've narrowed it down to where I don't think in a visionary way because it's like, if I think that way and I don't do it, then I'm a failure. And so just
Hmm.
really, I think appreciating that mindset of, yeah, just dream big, dream about it.
Yep.
And that doesn't mean it's got to happen, but it's a thought and it's moving in a direction, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great awareness. Um, Anything missing, disempowering, or incomplete?
I don't think so.
Okay. Once I turn the recording off, we'll just talk about scheduling the next session. And I want to give you some acknowledgement if you're open.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah. First thing I want to acknowledge you for is being willing to play on the edge. I think that the whole conversation really speaks to like, we're not just talking about concepts anymore. You know the concepts. What we're actually speaking to are the areas that are in your subconscious, the areas that are in your blind spots that like even like, a great concept like integrity, for example, where it's like you understand integrity, but there's also still a blind spot to your integrity. And this is really the work that we're doing here is continually challenging those edges of where you are to create the next level of these breakthroughs, the next level of your transformation. So thanks for really just like being in the conversation and being open to like, yeah, you have such a great relationship towards something like integrity or even something like possibility, but there are certain things that you're just not seeing about yourself because that's where the real opportunity is. That's where the real growth is going to be for you. And I really acknowledge you for that because that can be challenging in itself to have that pointed out or like, like, oh, I feel like I'm in integrity and yet there's this pieces that I wasn't present to or it's been in my subconscious like that takes true strength and courage to be able to like see that and move through that. I acknowledge your wisdom. There is, I wrote that word, I chose that essence word because you have an ability to see between the lines and you really have an ability to sense into like what is needed next. What am I hearing? What do I need next? I think what you're speaking to in terms of creating a project for yourself around career and these all these areas. Absolutely, because that's going to challenge you and push you to really practice with that muscle of possibility. It's like in a sense that we're practicing flexibility, but we're also practicing intention, right? That like, hey, if you actually go create this project around a business, we're standing for you to go create it. But in the standing of the creation, there also has to be a flexibility, an ability to bring yourself grace in the creation of it. So it's like all the edges that are here, they're gonna show up, but we get to work with them. We get to actually work with them together to move you forward. Um, yeah, man. And again, it just I acknowledge you for I acknowledge you for the vision and the possibility because it's absolutely there. And it's like you've spoken to, it's like over these years, the heaviness, the experiences, the frustrations that have occurred, it's created a lot of pain and heartache and struggle. And yet the essence burning within you isn't allow it will not allow you to fall down into that pathway of just being that like burnt out, construction worker who just lives the rest of his life, in pain and drinking and that type of thing. It's like the fire burning within you is desires to have more of that fulfillment. And that's really powerful. That's really powerful. That is a story to share over the years to come is that like you can be a representation of a man who had big dreams, big goals, has gone through these experiences and still can have big dreams and big goals and create them even in a more powerful way. So great work, man. Really awesome conversation.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
For sure.